John Kennedy just destroys Ilhan Omar with classified evidence. She's finished. The Senate Intelligence Committee chamber stood as a monument to the gravity of American governance, its high ceilings and polished mahogany walls steeped in decades of hushed discussions about national security threats, from Cold War espionage to modern cyber warfare. Today, however, the room buzzed with an unprecedented energy, a palpable sense that history was being written in real time. At the center of the dais sat Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, a figure whose sharp intellect and plain-spoken Southern charm had earned him a reputation as a relentless defender of truth, capable of dismantling even the most carefully constructed defenses with his incisive questions and unyielding logic. His presence commanded the chamber not through bluster, but through the quiet authority of a man who knew the weight of the moment and the responsibility it carried. Around him, rows of senators from both parties sat in attentive silence, joined by a cadre of intelligence officials from the FBI, NSA, and DHS, their stern faces reflecting the seriousness of the occasion. Legal scholars scribbled notes, and a select group of journalists granted rare access to this classified proceeding, watched with bated breath, aware that they were witnessing a rare confrontation that could reshape the political landscape. Across the long oak table sat Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, her posture upright, but her eyes betraying a flicker of apprehension beneath her practiced composure. Known for her rise from Somali refugee camps to the halls of Congress, Omar had built a career on bold advocacy and a narrative of resilience, but today she faced a scrutiny unlike any before, led by a senator whose reputation for cutting through rhetoric left little room for evasion. Kennedy adjusted his glasses, leaned into the microphone, and began his voice carrying the distinctive Louisiana drawl that made his words resonate like a courtroom summation. Folks, good morning, and thank you for being here in this chamber, a place where we've tackled some of the toughest threats to our nation. Today's hearing isn't about politics as usual, nor is it about settling scores or chasing headlines. It's about protecting the integrity of the republic we all serve, ensuring that those entrusted with public office uphold the laws and values that hold this country together. Over recent months, at the direction of this committee, the intelligence community folks who don't play favorites and don't bend to pressure has conducted a meticulous investigation into potential vulnerabilities within our government. What they've uncovered demands our attention, and it starts with you, Congresswoman Omar. Your story as a refugee who found opportunity in America has inspired many, but our analysts have found evidence suggesting that story was built on a foundation of systematic deception, beginning with your entry into this country. Kennedy's hand rested on a stack of classified folders, each one marked with the seals of agencies like the FBI, DHS, and Interpol, their contents representing months of painstaking work by career professionals dedicated to safeguarding American sovereignty. Let's cut to the chase. In 2009, you entered a marriage with Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi, a union that coincided with efforts to secure him immigration benefits, student visas, work authorizations, and a path to residency, while records show you were already in a committed relationship with another individual. Immigration authorities flagged this early on because the timelines didn't add up. For instance, travel records place Mr. Elmi in London pursuing studies at the exact same time he was supposedly enrolled at a college in Minneapolis with visa applications filed under biographical details that varied just enough to dodge automated systems, but not enough to escape a deeper look. To get to the truth, we didn't just rely on dusty files or hearsay, we partnered with international allies. Interpol, the Kenyan National Archives, where your family resided in refugee camps, and even the Somali government, which has opened some of its records in recent years. What we found isn't a simple case of clerical errors or the chaos of displacement. It's a complex web of identities, passports, birth dates, social security numbers that points to deliberate sustained fraud designed to exploit loopholes in our immigration system. On the chamber's high-resolution screens, a detailed diagram flickered to life. Not a family tree in the traditional sense, but a forensic map of interconnected identities linking names, dates, and documents across 3 continents. One passport issued in 2005 under Elmi's name showed subtle facial discrepancies when compared to a 2010 application alterations that digital forensics experts identified as hallmarks of identity manipulation. Another record showed a social security number assigned to you congresswoman used by multiple individuals to claim benefits, file taxes, and establish credit histories, a pattern that repeated across family members over decades. Kennedy paused, letting the visual sink in, his tone steady but carrying the weight of undeniable evidence. But we didn't stop at paper trails, because documents can be forged, lost, or explained away. Science gives us clarity where stories get muddy. Under warrants approved by federal courts, the FBI's forensic laboratory in Quantico conducted DNA analysis on samples voluntarily provided by Mr. Elmi and close relatives in your family. They examined 24 genetic markers, standard for establishing familial ties with precision, and the results are as clear as day. The probability of a full sibling relationship between you and Mr. Elmi is 99.98%, with the chance of no genetic connection at a mere 0.42%. In plain English, Congresswoman Science confirms that Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi is your biological brother, meaning your 2009 marriage was not a genuine partnership, but a calculated sham to secure immigration benefits he wouldn't otherwise qualify for, benefits like access to educational grants, work permits, and a green card. Omar leaned forward, her voice rising with the indignation that had carried her through past controversies, her hands gesturing for emphasis. Senator Kennedy, I have to object. This line of inquiry feels like a targeted attack on the immigrant experience on families like mine who fled war, starvation, and chaos in places like Somalia and Kenya. Refugee records are often incomplete, contradictory, or lost in the upheaval of conflict. To take those gaps and spin them into accusations of fraud is unfair, and it smacks of prejudice against those of us who've had to fight for a place in this country. Kennedy met her gaze, his expression calm but unyielding, his response delivered with the precision of a seasoned debater who'd heard every deflection and knew how to counter it. Congresswoman, let me be as clear as a bell. This isn't about where you're from, what you believe, or the hardships you've faced. America's built on welcoming folks who've overcome those odds, and we celebrate that. But this is about choices, specific documented actions that don't align with the laws every American, no matter their story, is expected to follow. DNA doesn't care about your background. It tells the truth. And the truth here is that you signed affidavits under penalty of perjury swearing to relationships that science proves false. This isn't one slip-up or a mix-up from a war-torn country. It's a pattern of manipulation, multiple social security numbers tied to the same people, tax returns filed under aliases for the same years, housing subsidies and educational grants claimed through recycled identities. Bank records even show early campaign funds funneled into payments that greased these immigration schemes, suggesting this wasn't just personal gain, but a strategy to build influence on a shaky foundation. To underscore the point, Kennedy nodded to the technical team, and a secure video feed blinked onto the screens connecting to a legal office in London. A man sat at a table flanked by British solicitors, his features bearing an unmistakable resemblance to Omar's. State your full name for the record, Kennedy instructed, his voice firm but polite. Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi. The man replied, his British accent crisp and clear. And what is your relationship to Congresswoman Ilhan Omar? She's my biological sister. We grew up in the same family. Our marriage in 2009 was arranged to help me navigate U.S. immigration rules for schooling and residency. It was never a real marriage, just a way to work around what we saw as unfair restrictions. The chamber fell into a stunned hush, the live confession aligning perfectly with the DNA report glowing on the screen beside him, its federal seals and lab certifications leaving no room for doubt. Omar's legal team huddled, whispering urgently, their prepared talking points suddenly inadequate against the weight of genetic evidence and first-hand testimony. Kennedy pressed forward, his logic relentless but never cruel. Building his case like a farmer stacking bales of hay, methodical, unhurried, and impossible to topple. You've heard it straight from the source committee members, backed by science and records that trace back to entry points at our borders. This isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a broader enterprise where family members cycled through false documentation to access benefits meant for those who play by the rules, housing subsidies, student aid, even voter registrations tied to questionable identities. Our analysts call this one of the most elaborate identity fraud schemes by an elected official in modern history, and it undermines the trust in our immigration system, making it harder for honest applicants around the world. Omar tried to regain her footing, her voice steadier but tinged with desperation. Senator, these are old matters exaggerated to paint a conspiracy where there was only survival. Families in exile do what they must to rebuild discrepancies in records are the scars of war, not proof of malicious intent. Kennedy countered swiftly, his words like a well-aimed arrow, respectful but piercing. Survival is one thing, and America honors it, but intent is proven by patterns, sworn statements that contradict biology, coordinated travel logs that defy logic, and financial trails showing benefits siphoned through these setups. If it walks like fraud and talks like fraud, well, folks, it's probably fraud. Ignoring this sets a dangerous precedent, inviting more abuse and eroding the fairness that our immigration laws are built on. As the first chapter of this hearing drew to a close, the atmosphere in the chamber had shifted irrevocably. Omar's initial confidence, honed by years of navigating controversies, began to crack under the relentless pressure of irrefutable evidence, genetic reports, international records, and a live confession that no legal maneuvering could undo. Kennedy, with his unwavering focus on facts and his knack for framing complex issues in terms anyone could grasp, stood as a guardian of accountability, his resolve signaling that this was only the beginning. Folks, this is just the foundation. He concluded, his voice carrying a hint of the storm to come. What we've uncovered here isn't just about crossing borders, it's about crossing lines of trust, and we'll dig into that next. The senator's steadfast pursuit of truth promised that no stone would remain unturned in defense of the Republic's integrity. With the chamber still reeling from the revelations of immigration fraud, Senator John Kennedy wasted no time in transitioning to the next phase of the hearing, his sharp mind and unwavering commitment to transparency, guiding the proceedings forward like a steady hand on the tiller. Folks, we've established a pattern of deception at the very roots of entry into this country, but that was just the groundwork. Now let's examine how those same tactics of manipulation were applied to the sacred trust of American campaign finance, where donors expect their contributions to fuel democracy, not personal luxury. Kennedy's voice, infused with that distinctive Louisiana straightforwardness, cut through the lingering tension as he opened the second folder, a thick dossier compiled by Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, the FBI's financial investigators and forensic accountants who had traced every penny with mathematical precision. Since your entry into politics, Congresswoman Omar, Your campaign committees have funneled over $3.7 billion to E Street Group, a consulting firm that's essentially a one-client operation yours and owned by Tim Minot, who became your husband in 2020. This isn't standard consulting. It's what experts call round-tripping, where campaign dollars go out the door and circle back as personal benefits. On the screens, a complex financial flowchart appeared, arrows tracing funds from donor contributions to E Street Group, then splintering into personal accounts, luxury purchases, and failed business ventures that screamed of self-enrichment rather than political strategy. Bank statements show that within 48 hours of receiving campaign payments, equivalent sums popped up in accounts tied to high-end shopping sprees, mortgage payments, and investments that directly benefited your family. Correlations so tight that investigators described it as the most blatant campaign fraud they've seen in years. Kennedy paused, letting the diagram speak for itself, his logical breakdown making the scheme accessible even to those without a finance degree. But it's not just the big transfers. The devil's in the details, like your campaign credit card racking up $127,000 at stores like Gucci, Louis Vuitton, and Cartier, all logged as constituent services or community outreach in FEC filings. Receipts paint a clear picture: designer handbags labeled as event materials jewelry, as constituent gifts, and luxury hotel stays during family vacations far from your Minnesota district categorized as campaign travel. Federal rules are crystal clear. Campaign funds can't fund personal lifestyles, and converting donor money into extravagance violates that trust profoundly. Omar, sensing the mounting pressure, interjected with a practiced deflection, her voice carrying notes of outrage. Senator campaign finance is a maze of regulations, and any discrepancies stem from honest efforts to comply while serving my community. To frame this as theft ignores the complexities faced by underrepresented voices in politics. Kennedy responded with his trademark incisive clarity, dismantling the argument piece by piece, without raising his voice. Congresswoman complexity doesn't explain away surveillance footage from Neiman Marcus showing you personally authorizing $23,000 in designer clothing on a campaign card, or audio recordings of you instructing your treasurer to creatively categorize personal expenses as official ones. He activated the chamber's audio system, and Omar's voice filled the room. We need to be smart about this designer clothes, as professional wardrobe family trips as outreach. Keep it plausible for the FEC. The recording obtained through legal warrants revealed not just violations, but deliberate intent to deceive, leaving the committee in stunned silence as Kennedy continued. And it gets worse. Those funds propped up your husband's ventures, like a wine importing business that bought a mere 12 bottles over 2 years, while pocketing $340,000 in consulting fees, or a marijuana operation that never got licensed, never produced a thing, but absorbed $460,000, all shell games to launder political donations into private wealth. Treasury analysts peg this at 78% of your fundraising converted to personal use, a staggering abuse that robs donors and distorts democracy. As the financial revelations landed, blow after blow, Omar's composure began to fray, her legal team shuffling papers in vain. But Kennedy, ever the guardian of fiscal integrity, shifted gears seamlessly to an even graver concern. Now, with that financial web exposed, let's connect the dots to something far more dangerous: your associations and coordination with groups designated as foreign terrorist organizations, where rhetoric meets action in ways that threaten American lives. The third folder opened with a timeline on the screen syncing Omar's public statements with encrypted communications, financial transfers, and intelligence intercepts that painted a picture of systematic support for Hamas and similar entities. Your 2012 tweet about Israel hypnotizing the world NSA logs show it came 47 minutes after an encrypted message from a Hamas-linked IP in Gaza. Your "It's all about the Benjamins" comment in 2019, 36 minutes post-contact with a Hamas coordinator in Turkey. These aren't coincidences. They're coordinated messaging with patterns so consistent that analysts concluded you were part of their propaganda machine. Kennedy's delivery was measured, his logic exposing the timeline like peeling layers of an onion, revealing the core threat beneath. But it's not just words. Financial intelligence traces $850,000 from Hamas fronts in Qatar to Minneapolis Somali organizations, which then paid your family businesses for vague services structured to dodge reporting thresholds. The Amal Foundation, flagged by Treasury as a Hamas facilitator, wired $340,000 to a local center, which funneled $315,000 to your entities within a month. A laundering chain that funded anti-Semitic campaigns while maintaining deniability. Omar pushed back, her tone defiant. "Senator, criticizing policy isn't terrorism. This is an attempt to silence dissent against foreign actions, weaponizing labels to smear a Muslim representative." Kennedy countered firmly, his words grounded in evidence. "We're not talking policy critique. We're talking direct meetings with Khalil al-Rashid, a known Hamas operative documented by FBI surveillance at Minneapolis spots. Lip reading from footage shows discussions of targets in Jewish communities. Temple Beth Shalom's weak security, a daycare's routines, a rabbi's walks, operational intel for potential attacks, not dialogue. He played the audio. Every Jewish family that leaves, every synagogue that closes, is a victory for our cause. The chamber gasped at Omar's recorded words endorsing harm backed by classified leaks, where House briefings on Israeli ops appeared in Hamas materials hours after her access. You've photographed classified docs in committee rooms, transmitting them via encrypted apps to terrorist networks, compromising U.S. security for ideological alignment. As the terrorism evidence mounted, intercepts footage recordings, Omar's defenses crumbled further, the weight of coordination with enemies of the state proving overwhelming. Kennedy closed this segment with solemn authority, his commitment to national safety evident. Folks, this isn't isolated incidents. It's a pattern of betrayal that endangers us all, and we'll see how it ties to foreign powers next. The Senate Intelligence Committee chamber, already taut with the weight of prior revelations, seemed to tighten further as Senator John Kennedy prepared to unveil the next layer of evidence, his piercing intellect and unwavering commitment to American principles anchoring the proceedings like a lighthouse in a storm. The room lined with polished wood and filled with senators, intelligence officials from the FBI, CIA, and NSA, and a handful of vetted journalists buzzed with anticipation, each person aware that the accusations were escalating into territory that could redefine trust in public office. Kennedy, with his signature Louisiana drawl and knack for cutting through complexity with plain-spoken truth, leaned into the microphone, his steady presence, a stark contrast to the growing unease across the table, where Congresswoman Ilhan Omar sat, her once confident demeanor now frayed under the relentless pressure of facts. Folks, we've laid bare a foundation of immigration fraud and a campaign finance scheme that turned donor trust into personal luxury. But what we're about to unpack is far graver, a systematic betrayal that reaches across borders to America's chief global rival and questions the very allegiance of a sitting member of Congress. His hand rested on the third folder, a thick dossier stamped with the seals of the CIA's Counterintelligence Center, the FBI's China Task Force, and NSA's Signals Intelligence Division, representing months of painstaking work to uncover a web of foreign influence that threatened national security at its core. Congresswoman Omar. While the public's been focused on your rhetoric and financial missteps, our investigators have traced a deeper threat coordinated efforts with Chinese intelligence services, where your votes and actions in Congress align with Beijing's strategic goals in ways that defy coincidence and demand accountability. On the chamber's high-resolution screens, a sprawling timeline flickered to life, mapping Omar's legislative record, opposition to sanctions, resistance to technology restrictions, support for trade policies, favoring China against financial inflows, encrypted communications, and intelligence intercepts that painted a damning picture. Let's start with a clear example. In February, you voted against the China Competition Act, a bill with strong bipartisan support to limit Chinese access to American semiconductor technology critical for our economic and military edge. Just weeks later, your husband's consulting firm E Street Group received a $230,000 wire transfer from Riverside Holdings LLC, a Delaware-based shell company that Treasury's forensic accountants have directly linked to China's Ministry of State Security. The timing isn't just suspicious, it's textbook quid pro quo, with funds funneled through layers of intermediaries to mask their source. But our analysts followed the money trail with precision. Kennedy paused, letting the visual sink in his logical breakdown, making the scheme accessible to all like a teacher explaining a complex equation in simple terms. And it didn't stop there, folks. In June, you blocked amendments requiring transparency on Chinese investments in U.S. infrastructure, roads, ports, energy grids, moves that would have protected our national security. By July, another $180,000 landed in your husband's failed wine importing venture from Hong Kong Pacific Trading, an entity the CIA identifies as a front for Chinese intelligence. These transfers, always within 24 to 48 hours of your votes, form a pattern so consistent that our investigators ruled out chance. They assess this as deliberate compensation for advancing Beijing's interests within our government. Omar, her face tightening under the scrutiny, leaned forward, her voice carrying a mix of defiance and exasperation. Senator Kennedy, international engagement is part of my role on the Foreign Affairs Committee. These accusations feel like a revival of Cold War paranoia, targeting my work to smear it as disloyalty and stoking prejudice against Asian nations in the process. Kennedy met her challenge with his characteristic clarity, his response grounded in evidence, and delivered with the calm authority of a man who'd seen through countless deflections. Congresswoman diplomacy doesn't involve clandestine meetings with People's Liberation Army intelligence officers accepting cash payments while discussing how to tilt U.S. policy in China's favor. He signaled to the technical team, and grainy but unmistakable FBI surveillance footage filled the screens, showing Omar at the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in Washington, D.C., meeting a known Chinese operative. The video captured her exchanging documents and receiving a thick envelope later confirmed by forensic analysis as $50,000 in unmarked bills. Audio captured via court-authorized directional microphones played for the chamber. Your votes on tech restrictions are critical. Delay them, and we'll ensure your family's ventures see more investment. Omar's voice responded, I understand. Every sanction stalled, every amendment blocked, strengthens the right side of history. The chamber murmured the recording, revealing not just transactions, but a willingness to prioritize foreign interests over American security, a betrayal laid bare by her own words. But the evidence went beyond financial ties. Kennedy continued his logic, relentless, as he unveiled the most alarming breach. NSA analysis identified 17 separate instances where classified materials from your Foreign Affairs Committee briefings sensitive assessments of U.S. military capabilities in the Indo-Pacific diplomatic strategies on trade disputes, intelligence on Chinese cyber operations appeared in Beijing's internal reports within hours of your access. Security footage shows you using a personal device to photograph these documents in secure rooms, a direct violation of protocol, then transmitting them via encrypted apps traced to Chinese intelligence units. This isn't a paperwork error, it's systematic espionage, handing our adversaries the tools to counter our defenses and outmaneuver us on the global stage. The leaks included specifics on U.S. naval deployments in the South China Sea, classified analyses of Chinese hypersonic missile programs and diplomatic cables on countering Beijing's Belt and Road initiatives, information that could only benefit a rival power. As the Chinese connections crystallized, Kennedy shifted to an even deeper betrayal, his voice carrying the weight of a patriot defending the nation's core principles. While serving Chinese interests is bad enough, Congresswoman, your own words, Somali first, American last, point to a loyalty that's never truly been with the country you swore to serve. The timeline on screen evolved now, overlaying your congressional votes on East African policies, aid packages, military cooperation, counter-terrorism efforts, with encrypted communications to Somali government officials, each move undermining U.S. interests when they conflicted with Mogadishu's agenda. NSA intercepts obtained legally show you in regular contact with the office of Somalia's president, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, sharing advanced details on American decisions like a $50 million military aid package to Ethiopia that you blocked just 48 hours after a Somali request to do so. The vote, which had broad bipartisan support, would have stabilized a key U.S. ally in the Horn of Africa, but your actions aligned with Somalia's territorial disputes instead. Kennedy's delivery was methodical, exposing the pattern like a chess master revealing a checkmate. Congressional records show 18 instances where your votes directly opposed U.S. strategic goals in East Africa when they clashed with Somali interests, whether it was aid to counter al-Shabaab or diplomatic support for Ethiopia's dam projects. You never registered as a foreign agent despite laws requiring it for such coordination. And that's not advocacy. It's acting as an unregistered operative for a foreign government. Omar pushed back, her voice strained but resolute, grasping at her narrative. Senator, my connection to Somalia is rooted in humanitarian concern for a nation ravaged by decades of war. Any coordination was about helping my people, not betraying America. Kennedy countered swiftly, his words like a hammer striking nails of truth. Helping your people doesn't involve smuggling classified documents out of secure facilities, as committee cameras caught you doing repeatedly, photographing U.S. military assessments of al-Shabaab threats, diplomatic strategies on Ethiopian-Somali border disputes, and details of our Djibouti base operations, intel that gave Somalia's military planners an edge at America's expense. He activated another recording, this one from a private Minneapolis dinner with the Somali president. Omar's voice chillingly clear. Every vote I cast, every piece of intel I share builds a stronger Somalia. America's just a platform for that mission. The chamber fell silent, the admission of prioritizing a foreign nation over her constituents cutting deeper than any prior evidence, her face paling as the weight of her words sank in. Kennedy wrapped up with solemn resolve, his commitment to the Republic unwavering. Folks, this isn't about heritage or compassion. It's about a pattern of espionage and divided loyalty, from cash payments for Chinese policy wins to leaking secrets for Somali gain, all while swearing an oath to serve America. We'll tie it all together next and see what it means for our democracy's future. The Senate Intelligence Committee chamber, heavy with the weight of revelations that had unfolded over hours, now held its breath as Senator John Kennedy prepared to deliver the final chapter of this unprecedented hearing. His sharp mind and unyielding dedication to American values had guided the proceedings, exposing a tapestry of deceit that threatened the Republic's core. Senators, intelligence officials from the FBI, CIA, and NSA, and a select group of journalists watched in rapt silence, aware that this moment would echo through history. Across the table, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar sat, diminished, her once confident facade cracked by a barrage of evidence, DNA tests, financial records, surveillance, and her own words that left no room for escape. Kennedy leaned into the microphone, his Louisiana drawl carrying the calm authority of a man who'd spent years defending truth with logic and resolve. Folks, we've walked through a trail of betrayal that began with immigration fraud, twisted through stolen campaign funds, and reached into coordination with terrorists and foreign powers. Now it's time to tie it all together and ask what it means for our democracy, for the trust we place in those we elect, and for the future of this nation we all cherish. He opened the final folder, a summary of the intelligence community's findings, stamped with the highest security clearances, representing a unified verdict from professionals sworn to protect America. Congresswoman Omar, the evidence we've laid out: decades of identity fraud, $3.7 million in donor money, diverted to luxury operational support for Hamas, cash from Chinese intelligence for policy favors, and loyalty to Somalia over America, shows not just mistakes, but a deliberate pattern of betraying your oath. The chamber's screens displayed a final timeline, weaving together genetic proof of a sham marriage, bank transfers to personal accounts, NSA intercepts of terrorist coordination, FBI footage of Chinese cash exchanges, and recordings admitting Somali allegiance. Each piece, Kennedy emphasized, was vetted through legal warrants and international cooperation. This isn't about your story or beliefs. It's about actions that have eroded the foundation of our government, actions that demand accountability to keep our democracy strong. Omar, her voice barely audible, tried one last defense, her words trembling with desperation. Senator, my work has always been for my community, for those left behind. Any errors were from passion, not disloyalty to America. Kennedy's response was swift, his logic cutting like a knife. Passion doesn't explain forging documents to scam immigration laws, stealing millions from voters, or leaking secrets to enemies. Your own voice, recorded, admits to using America as a tool for Somalia, to weakening us for China, to targeting communities for terrorists. These are choices, not errors, and they've been proven beyond doubt. He turned to the committee and the cameras, addressing the American public with solemn clarity. What we've shown today is a betrayal unmatched in recent history. A congresswoman who turned public office into a platform for personal gain and foreign agendas. You faked identities to exploit our welcome, stole from donors to fund extravagance, aided terrorists with intel-sold policy to China, and served Somalia over your constituents. This isn't politics. It's a violation of trust that strikes at our republic's heart. Kennedy's voice rose with conviction as he outlined the consequences, his commitment to justice unwavering. As chairman backed by the intelligence community, I recommend immediate steps. First, refer all evidence to the Department of Justice for prosecution under espionage, foreign agent fraud, and terrorism laws crimes that carry severe penalties. Second, send this to the House Ethics Committee for expulsion under the Constitution, as your actions disgrace this institution. Third, refer to Homeland Security for denaturalization, since your citizenship was gained through fraud and used to harm us. Fourth, direct Treasury to seize assets from your criminal gains. Fifth, revoke all security clearances as you remain a threat to our nation. And finally, I urge you to resign now, sparing your constituents further betrayal and letting them choose a true representative. The chamber stirred as the stakes became clear, not just Omar's downfall, but a reckoning for democracy itself. Her legal team sat silent, their defenses crushed as Omar's expression betrayed total collapse. Kennedy faced the cameras, his words a call to action for every American. This hearing teaches us a vital lesson. Democracy thrives only when we demand integrity from our leaders. Public service isn't a license to deceive or profit. It's a duty to put America first. Every citizen must stay engaged, vote wisely, and hold power accountable, because our system depends on us to keep it honest. When we choose leaders, we choose the future. Let's choose those who honor their oaths, not those who exploit them. As he finished, FBI agents entered, approaching Omar's table. The woman who once stood as a progressive symbol was led away in handcuffs, facing charges that could mean decades behind bars. Kennedy gathered his folders, his face reflecting the somber duty of a patriot who'd upheld the Constitution. Today, we've proven that no one is above the law, not a refugee, not a congresswoman, not anyone. Our democracy endures because we confront threats with truth and resolve ensuring justice prevails, and America remains strong. The chamber fell silent. Kennedy's words a testament to the Republic's resilience and a reminder that vigilance is the price of freedom.